So, when I was about 5 years old, I went to this small country church with my parents. My uncle was actually the pastor of the church, and his house was just a little ways away from the church. And there was this big field in between his house and the church. And every Sunday at the end of the church, all of us kids would go out to this field, this big grass field, and just play. We would play tag or football or who knows what different activities we could think of. And there was this one time, though, that we were playing tag, and there was a bully there. And this bully kept trying to trip me and my friend, and finally I got tired of it. And so 5-year-old Perry raised up his fist and went to punch this bully. I got on top of him, I jumped on top of him, and I went to punch this bully, and he rolled away. And I hit my friend, who I didn't know was underneath him. I punched my friend right in the mouth on accident and knocked his tooth out. Of course, he ran to his mom crying, and I got into some pretty serious trouble that day. But as you can tell, 5-year-old Perry didn't necessarily know what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, and definitely didn't grasp the idea of loving your enemy the way Jesus called us to love our enemies. And so that is what we're going to be talking about today. As a follower of Jesus, who is supposed to be on mission for him, how do we love our enemies? And so it is my privilege to bring to you the 9th episode of the On Mission podcast, where you can watch wherever you're watching right now, or you can go to the Podbean podcast and listen to it there. And so I'm excited to have you all here and talk to you about what it means to love your enemies. And as we have talked several times, one of the things that we need to be doing as we are on mission with Jesus is we need to be loving people in a way that catches their attention. It surprises them. They should know us by our love. They should know that there's something different about us, and that difference is that we follow Jesus because of how we love each other and other people. And loving your enemies is just another part of that. Jesus said it this way in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 through 44. He said, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy." That's normal, like we've heard that, right? But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And when people hear that, they're like, why would I love my enemy? I mean, what have those people done for me? And do I even want to do this? Well, as a follower of Jesus, this is what you're supposed to do. And the first question that we have to ask if we really want to follow Jesus and what he's asked us to do is we need to ask the question, who is our enemy? And so for many of us, that can be a different person. If you look at the Greek word, it says this is someone you hate. Maybe it's your adversary, which is not quite as maybe intense. And then, of course, your enemy. That's the Greek word for this. And so that person, your enemies, that could be a variety of different people. It could be a relative, especially now during the holiday season, that person you are always butting heads with when it comes to the Christmas parties. You're disagreeing with. You're fighting about who's going to be at the party and who's not going to be and why they're not going to be there and how it affects grandma or grandpa or who knows. Maybe it's your coworker. If you're an Office fan, maybe you've got a Dwight or an Angela in your office that just really grinds your gears, and they're just not nice people. Or maybe it's your neighbor. You know, I've had some great neighbors. Right now I've got some great neighbors, and I've had some terrible neighbors before, where it's just like that can make or break your housing situation, and it is possible for your neighbor to be your enemy. And then, of course, there's people who actually wish you real harm. You know, more of like an enemy that you might have in an actual battle or war. I don't think that's as common in our society right now, but I know that there are people who could be watching right now who have real enemies. And yet Jesus asks us to love those people, no matter what kind of an enemy that it might be. And that's tough to do. And probably the first thing is our hearts that we need to work on. I mean, how do we do this if our hearts aren't in it? And so if we're going to love our enemies, I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to start praying for them because it starts to affect our hearts. When you're praying for someone consistently for their well-being, eventually your heart starts to soften for that person typically. And so we need to be doing that. Pray for God to reach them. Pray for opportunities for us to love on them, to see a need and do something awesome. And when we do that, I think over time, our heart will start to soften towards them. But then we need to be intentional. We talk about that all the time on this podcast, on this vlog, and we need to be intentional to be friendly with these folks. We need to engage with them on purpose, and more than just general small talk, but that's kind of where it starts, right? But ask them how they're doing, how their family's doing. Show interest in their lives, and just try to take an interest in them. And they may or may not even respond to it at first, especially if the more of an enemy they are, the more they will be less likely to respond. And so, hopefully by showing interest over time, you can build maybe some trust, and they can start to see that you really do care about them. But of course, oftentimes bullies and people who are your enemies, there's things that are going on in their lives that they almost don't even want people to care about them. And so that can be the case. They may be pushing you away, but if you consistently show interest, it may provide opportunities for you to ask them, like, hey, can I pray for you about this? And maybe they won't say anything, or maybe you'll just pick up on some things and you can just pray more specifically for them. But over time, as you start to learn more about these people, as you spend more time with them, you do have times where you can invite them to different things. Right now is a perfect opportunity to invite people to Christmas Eve services. It's a huge opportunity because it's one of the few times people will actually say yes. Easter and Christmas Eve, those are really important times because people are thinking about God more often. They're thinking about tradition and holidays and stuff like that. But as we've said more and more, it's inviting them to do things in life outside of church as well. Inviting them to come and join you, maybe for lunch, especially if it's a coworker or something like that. Inviting people over to your house or to go and do different activities with them. And then, of course, just looking for those opportunities to share about the things that are happening at your church, or perhaps to share about things that you have learned from Jesus and how it might apply to what you're talking about with them. And sometimes those situations won't come up though, because again, if they're really your enemy, they may not want to talk to you much. And so those are not always opportunities that are available. And so sometimes you have to rely on the random act of kindness. You have to give them a gift. You have to, shower them with love that they're not expecting. And we've had some opportunities as a church recently to do a lot of these different things at different restaurants. But when you're doing it with someone it's even more impactful. They don't necessarily need to know it was you, but if they do find out, it may start to make them wonder why you're treating them the way you are, considering all of the things that they may have done to you or how they've treated you. And sometimes the reason why you're enemies with someone is because they're such a rotten person, they may not even notice. And the thing that we have to remember is that, yes, we are doing this for them, but ultimately we're doing it for God. And he promised us that we would be persecuted. He promised that people would treat us poorly because they treated Jesus poorly. And so we can expect that to happen sometimes. But these are some pretty good things to do. So pray for people. Invite them, be kind to them, and try to be random in your acts of kindness with them. And hopefully over time, their hearts will soften and they will be interested in turning to Jesus as well. And one thing I've noticed is a lot of people who are really against God or against you because of whatever reason, if they know that you're a follower of Jesus, when things really hit the fan in their lives, when things really go poorly, you're also going to quite often be that person that they turn to, because they know that you'll actually do something about it, because they know that in the end you really love them. And that is the head-turning kind of love that we need to be able to show to people so that they know that they can turn to us. So thank you all again for tuning in. I appreciate you. Feel free to check our previous episodes right here wherever you're watching, or you can go to my Instagram page, my Facebook page, or several different pages connected with my church. And again, you can listen to all these on Podbean podcasts. Please feel free to share this, leave a comment or a message on your own thoughts as well. We'd love to get the word out on this to just be able to impact and equip people for being on mission with Jesus and for Jesus. So thanks again for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you all again in a couple weeks.